Aloha and welcome. In this video, we're going to be talking about driver manipulation, privilege escalation, and password attacks. So the first thing we're going to talk about are driver manipulation attacks. So what is a driver? Well, a device driver is a little piece of software that allows your operating system to control a piece of hardware. So it's called device driver, hardware driver, or just driver. So example of this is going to be a printer. So in Windows or on your Mac, you've got a device driver for your printer. That's going to allow Windows or Mac, whatever Mac operating system you're using, it's going to allow applications to print documents by providing that little piece of software that goes between the operating system and the device itself, the printer in this case. So there are things called driver shims out there. And driver shims are pieces of software that intercept device driver calls. And they exist for a legitimate purpose. A driver shim often, if you want to give backwards compatibility to something, for example, Windows 10 provides backwards compatibility with Windows 8 device drivers by using driver shims. So you can use the Windows 8 device drivers, but use a driver shim that's made for Windows 10. That's going to intercept the calls to that, and it's going to update it so that you can use your old device drivers within Windows 10. So, and that exists with, between multiple versions here. We're about to say goodbye to Windows 10. In another week, I think. So, we'll be seeing that probably, well, we already see it in Windows 11. So, so driver shims, they're legitimate, but there's something called a shim attack, also known as shimming, and that's when you place malicious code inside the driver shim. So the driver shim is already intercepting the device calls or the calls to the device driver. So the malicious code in the device in the driver shim is executed when a device driver call is made by the operating system. So the operating system is going to call for the shim, and then it's going to execute that malicious code. So the attacker, they're going to put their malicious code inside the driver shim, and then that shim is going to call on the device driver itself. So we have something also called refactoring, and refactoring, it's a technique in software development. All it means really is to update when we have code out there, it's a good practice to go and do what we call refactoring, which is to review the code and try to improve it, not add functionality. We're going to keep it functionally the same. We're just trying to make it more efficient, better, faster. And the idea is we go through these reviews and we update it. We try to write it in a more concise way. Sometimes your first attempt at doing something isn't the best, but you want to refactor it. You want to improve upon it. Well, there's something called a refactoring attack, and this is a nasty little thing where they go in and they take your code, the initial code that worked, and they add functionality to it. But the functionality is the malicious code. So it's going to do the same things functionally. Let's say, their example that they use, and this is a brilliant one, a refactored printer driver is going to be a printer that still does the same thing that the original driver did, except that it also sends a copy of your print jobs to a remote printer or a remote computer somewhere, so they can see everything that you print. So that's how you're going to attack, something using a refactoring attack. Then we have the privilege escalation topic. So privilege escalation is when you try to gain privileges that are not assigned to you. There's two different types. There's vertical and there's horizontal privilege escalation. So a vertical privilege escalation is when you're able to somehow get privileges above your permissions. So let's say that you're just a regular end user, and if you're able to get vertical privilege escalation, let's say you can get root privileges, that's considered a vertical privilege escalation because you've gone from user down here to God mode basically. So that's vertical privilege escalation. And horizontal privilege escalation is when it's when the user gains privileges that are assigned to another user. but within the same the same level. So, for example, a horizontal privilege escalation may enable an internet banking user to access the internet bank account of another user. So instead of me, I can grab Bob's account or Jackie's account, something like that. So that would be a horizontal privilege escalation. And then, pardon, we have password attacks. So password attacks, uh, there's different types that we're going to discuss here. We're going to talk about brute force and spraying. So brute force is when you try every single combination of every single password. And early on in the course, we went through and I showed you how to use different sites to check your password strength and check the amount of time it would take to break it if they're using a brute force attack. So if you do a very long password, it takes a lot more time because there's so many combinations for each letter that you add there. And as you add on, letters, you increase the complexity, quite a lot, or you increase the amount of time that it takes to crack that password greatly. So as we're making these big long passwords here, it becomes harder to brute force it because it takes more and more time to do that. So if you had a million, choices here, you add another character, you've got a million times to the eighth for number of for the amount of time it would take to crack that. So it takes quite a long time using brute force, unless you're lucky. So brute force, it's not the most elegant way of doing it, but if you have a GPU or something like that, you can attack something. So brute force is best if you have a copy of. So in the old days, like in a Linux or a Unix environment, you had a file that listed all the passwords, and they had hash values in there. But if you were trying to figure out what they were, you could, if you knew the hash algorithm everything used, you could just sit there and run a program over and over and over. They had something, I think it was Jack the Ripper, or no, John the Ripper, I think it was called. So they would run John the Ripper against it, and it would try combinations until it came up with that. There's ways of slowing that down. There's salting techniques where you add characters to it, to the hash, and then you hash it, or into the password, and then you hash it. There's different things you can do to throw that off. But the idea is that if you have a GPU that does, cranks out billions of operations a second, that can help you brute force things. Still may take a long time, but you can still brute force things. But now, if you're going to a website, let's say you're going to your bank, Bank of Hawaii, and you're trying to brute force that, often you have lockout after 3 attempts or 5 attempts, something like that. So brute force isn't really going to be very, useful there. So the other type of attack we have, it's called spraying. I've heard it derogatorily referred to as spray and pray. But the idea for that one is there's a list of, I think it's 200 passwords that are the most common passwords. And they usually, some security organization will print this every year, but it's a list of the most commonly cracked passwords. And it's amazing to see the passwords that come up on it. Often up around number one is going to be password or password one, password 123, combinations like that. So there's a list of those, and people will take that list, or attackers will take that list, and they will basically try it against, they'll try certain ones against the entire list of users. So they'll go through there and just try to see who in this group uses weak passwords or is lazy and are using like password or password 123. So that's the spray and pray way, because you're spraying it, you're just randomly trying it out there, and you're trying it with different people. So this is the spraying method. So so brute force, you're trying every single combination of a possible password, and it could take you 1 trillion years. Or you can go the spraying route, and the spraying route is going to be, you take commonly used passwords, as we know from history, what people are using, and then you take a list of usernames and try each username with each one of those easy passwords to see which one you can crack. So that's it for this section. Oh, wait, no, we also need to talk about default credentials. I've mentioned this before. Default credentials are big no-nos. So when you get a device like a when you buy a new router that has a wireless access point and everything, often you get it with default username and password. If you want to find the default username and password for your device, you can go out there and type in Netgear and whatever model number you have, and and put in default username, and it'll tell you. Often it's admin and password, or the username is blank and the password is admin or something like that. But it's they're they're all available out on the net, and this is a sadly common way of breaking into institutions. You would not believe how many high-profile break-ins, cyber attacks have been successful because of default credentials. So whenever you get devices, always change that username and password. Always change that. Do not keep your default credentials on there. Always change your username and password. If you can't change the username because sometimes the admin account, they don't allow you to, at least change that password. Otherwise, you're going to be open to a world of pain. So that's it for this section. Again, to recap, driver manipulation is one thing that we can do. Device drivers, that little piece of software that helps operating systems control hardware. You've got driver shims that give you backwards compatibility with older operating systems. Attackers can put in malicious code into that shim so that it does not just the functionality, but something bad. We've got refactoring attacks, and refactoring attacks is when you give it the same functionality, but you put in some bad stuff, like, yes, we still print, but we also send that data to another place. Then we've got privilege escalation. We've got, going into God mode. We've got that vertical privilege escalation. We've got horizontal privilege escalation, so you can do things as other people at the same level, or you can go all the way up and be, a C-suite executive type of vertical escalation. Then we have the password attacks I just talked about, the brute force attacks where you're trying every single combination. Then we've got the pray and spray, or the spray and pray, where we're going through the user list and trying all the commonly used password combos and default credentials. We always change our default credentials when we buy new equipment. Just repeat after me. Always replace default credentials on new equipment, or used if you're buying it used. Always replace it. So that's it for this lesson. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. I'd be glad to help. Aloha.